Hello YouTube, welcome to another video. In this video I'm going to be dealing with a problem I have with the lighting in my downstairs hallway. Let me explain. The problem is that these lights here in the hall are controlled from this light switch down here. Now that's fine if you're coming in at night time through the front door, click the switch, the lights come on, you can see where you're going. But if you're coming from the opposite direction, there's no switch down this end of the corridor to switch on these lights. So if it's dark and someone knocks on the door, you're walking down this corridor in the dark before you can reach the light switch, which is over here. So to try and resolve this problem, I installed one of these motion sensor type switches so that if you open the front door, it will detect the motion and turn the lights on for a set amount of time before they then switch off. And if you come into the corridor from the other end, it detects the motion and turns the lights on ahead of you so that you can make your way to the front door without tripping over something in the dark. Now, this worked really well at first, but it did have a couple of downsides. So at first, it was so sensitive that unfortunately when you walked round the end of the corridor to go up the stairs, it would activate even though you weren't coming down the corridor, which is a bit wasteful, but we could live with that. But the other problem is that now it seems to have lost its sensitivity, and if you come into the corridor now, it doesn't seem to pick up your motion until you're pretty much at the sensor itself. So it's no longer really fit for purpose because it doesn't turn the lights on for you. So what is the solution to this problem? Well, ideally I'd like to have a switch at this end and also a switch at the far end so that I can turn the lights on from either end, just like you do with your up and upstairs lights. Usually you have a switch at the bottom of the stairs to turn the upstairs lights on and also a switch at the top of the stairs. So I want to have the same sort of mechanism here. The trouble is there is no wiring that goes from this wall socket here to down the far end of the corridor so that I could put in place a kind of dual switch mechanism. So the only way I can really solve this problem is to use some sort of intelligent switches that can send a message to another switch, and another switch can send a message to this switch telling them to turn on and off. So that's what I'm going to do. So at this end of the corridor there is a switch socket here, which is the one to turn the upstairs lights on. So what I'd like to do is replace this switch with a double switch, one which turns the upstairs lights on as before, and the second switch which will enable us to turn on the lights in the hallway. Now, as I said, there's no direct wiring connection between this socket and the socket at the far end. So I'm going to have to use some sort of smart switches to do this. And I've found some online that use the Tasmota firmware that if you've seen my previous videos, you'll see I use the smart plugs with that firmware on as well. So here is the Atom Smart Switch. It's just arrived. So in here we've got some wiring instructions. Now it gives you there's two versions of this available apparently. I didn't realise this when I ordered them, but there's a version that requires only a live connection and a version that requires a live and neutral connection. Now I've ordered the version that requires a live and neutral connection, and this potentially might cause me some problems, so we'll have to look at that. And obviously you've got the little Tasmota firmware manual again, as with my previous ones. It tells you how to set up the wireless connection. And then this, got a couple of screws in the bottom there. And this is the switch. It's got a nice feel to it. Looks quite good. And then you've got your live and neutral there, which is basically the power supply for the small microcontroller that will be in here. And then this is your live switching line. So this will go active when you click the switch to and runs to the light in order to actually turn the light on. Now I noticed it's got these sort of twist-on connectors for the screws. I don't know if these line up nicely with the British socket mounting that's embedded in the wall where the two screws go in. If it does, then fantastic, but if it doesn't, that could also cause me a few problems. But worst case, I just have to put some sort of sticky pads on there and just push it in and it'd stick to the wall. So you can also get a 2-switch version and a 3-switch version, which I've also got some of in order to tackle some of the other switches that I mentioned. And obviously for those, this L2 and L3 would be for the other 2 switches. But yeah, it's quite nice. Let's see if we can get that installed. I've taken the faceplate off, and luckily this socket has both the neutral and the live lines coming in. So I should be able to connect this new box on here without any problems at all. So what I've got to do is get the 2 neutrals out of that little joint connector there and put them into a new one that has 3 slots on it, so that I can run a new neutral line off of there to go to the small microcontroller in the switch, and then the live lines will just go in and out. So I'll do that next. Okay, so that's the new box on there. So now I just need to have a new neutral line coming off of here. I've got a bit of spare lighting cable, so I'll just take the neutral line out of this. Okay, so let's just pop that in there. Okay, so now we've got our pieces that we need. So now we can attach the new faceplate. Okay, so we need neutral and live, and then the live that goes off to the light switch. So this is obviously the neutral, so probably want to make this a little bit shorter. I need to understand which one of these two is the live and which is the switch live. So in order to do that, I'm going to connect it up with my multimeter and turn the power back on, just so I can see which one registers 240 volts. So the power's off at the moment. Okay, the power's on, and that is registering 235 volts. So that is the live. Okay, I've switched that off again and it's gone back to 0. So this is the live one. So this needs to go into the live. Now we just need to turn on the power. Hope there's no explosions. We have a flashing light. This is good. And the lights come on. And the lights go off. Okay, so that's all working. The next stage will be to replace this switch here with a new one. But there's no neutral in this one, so that's going to be a bit more complicated. So I'll leave that for the next video. In the meantime, I think I'm going to add a rule to my system so that the hall lights will switch on automatically when it's dark. At least until I can get the other switches in place. So what I'm going to do is I've created a new rule called hall lights. And this will switch on when there's at most 0 watts, which means basically when it's dark, because there'll be no solar power when the sun's not shining. So we want this to be active between 4 o'clock, say, all the way up to midnight on every day of the week. And to stop it switching on and off and on and off and on and off at about the time the sun's setting, because sometimes you get a bit of solar for a few seconds and then you're not getting any, and then you are getting a watt or two and then you're not getting any. I don't want it to keep switching on and off. So once it activates for the first time, I want it to stay on for at least, let's say, 2 hours. And then after that it should stay on right the way up until midnight. Okay, let's see how we get on with that. Okay, that's it for the first part. I'll be tackling the other switches in later videos, so if you'd be interested in following that, please do subscribe to my channel. Like, comment, and share the video with anyone who may be interested in these Tasmota Smart Switches, and I will see you all on the next video. Cheers.